providing people don't stop making artwork, we're always going to have that, right? There's going to be new individuals with their own experiences, their own perspective, their own lens on life and reality and design, their own tastes, and they're going to bring that to the table, right? Since I've been running my business, I contract people and hire them for projects, and I hire them for their vision, right? And for what they can bring, but often something that I can't bring, right? Because it's not me. So yeah, I don't think that's not about to disappear. And that really sets us apart from AI.
Please welcome a Learn Squared legend for today's episode, who arrives in the form of concept artist and our instructor, Alex FIgini. Alex's infamous course, Concepting in ZBrush, has influenced a generation of artists in the industry and continues to do so. And in this episode, we discuss what is going on in the industry today, from the downturn in freelance work to the impact of AI and how this has been affecting Alex directly, both as a freelance artist and as a business owner, plus much more. Plenty to unpack in this episode. Let's go.
Let's go. Everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and I'm delighted to welcome on very special guest, Alex FIgini. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, you have many links to Learn Squared, one of them being one of our instructors. But we always have a lot of guests that come on, not guests, maybe guests too, but a lot of students, a lot of listeners that are completely new to our industry. And this is the first time maybe they've been exposed to just concept art and being an artist in general, and obviously to yourself. So if you wouldn't mind just giving everybody an intro as to who you are and what you do.
Sure, yeah. I'm a concept artist. I've been in the industry for about 18 years now, which makes me sound really old. But I've worked on a number of titles. Started out in the UK working on racing games, a series called Motorstorm. That's kind of where I cut my teeth and my first opportunity in games. And worked on that franchise up until 2012, so for 6 years. And then went to Canada and started working for BioWare. Got to work on the end of Mass Effect 3, the director's cut, some of the DLC, and then spent the majority of my time at the studio working on Anthem for, I think it was like almost 5 years. And then I'd had enough of working in the studio and wanted to go freelance and start my own business. So since the end of 2017, I've been running my own business. And yeah, moved back to the UK 2022 and just continued on. So that's me in a nutshell. I do all sorts of design work, but probably best known for like my mech stuff, predominantly driven by the course I did for you guys at Learn Squared. I think that got me quite well known within the industry anyway. Yeah. 18
years, like you said, when you look at it in that aspect, yes, it does feel like a long time. It's a legal adult if they started 18 years ago. But does it feel long for you? Like when you look back at it and look at it in that way, how does it feel to be a professional for that long?
It's weird because I don't feel 40. So it's and time seems to have accelerated. I'm sure you can kind of mirror that sentiment. But yeah, I mean, obviously the industry's changed a hell of a lot in that time, and a lot has happened. Yeah. But it almost seems like a blink of the eye, if I'm honest. Because I can remember when I started out like vividly in my early 20s, and I've changed a lot, obviously, as an artist and as a person. But yeah, the industry's definitely changed the kind of atmosphere in studios, the type of work that's being done. Specifically for concept artists, I started out purely 2D, almost zero 3D in my workflow at all. And now a lot of, I see purely 3D concept artists who don't touch 2D. So it's a very different approach I mean, I'm not sure how it was for you, but I trained in 2D for the majority of my life, through both driven by myself and through formal education. So it's interesting for me to see that kind of jump. Obviously, there's different routes to get to the industry, and people have different paths to it. But yeah, it's definitely a different landscape now. And with that said, the quality has just kind of escalated throughout the years, quite intimidating at times. And there's such a huge influx of talent to the industry from globally. You're kind of like awestruck. Whenever I go on ArtStation, I'm kind of awestruck. Like, wow, like so much talent from new artists as well, like people who I've not seen before. So it's awesome that it's flourishing.
Yes,
that obviously has another impact as well. As we've seen, there's been like a massive expansion, and then there's been a contraction, I'd say, over the last like 18 months. We've kind of seen the repercussions of that, or at least some of the repercussions. We might want to talk about that a little later in terms of what's happened in the industry over the past little bit. But I know a lot of people have been out of work, and it's definitely a kind of like a volatile time for a number of different reasons. But yeah, things are still awesome. I'm definitely hopeful for new and upcoming artists, although it's very different to when I started out. But I probably wouldn't have got a job based on my portfolio entering the industry. I don't think I would have got a job now. I wouldn't have hired me. So I think the guys who did hire me, they gave an olive branch. There's some potential with this guy. We'll see what we can do with him. But yeah,
what would you say is like the most obvious thing from back then to now? Like, is it just the level of quality or the level of execution? Like, what is so different, would you say, versus back then to now?
I think the tool sets have changed, definitely, and that's meant what people are delivering is a little different. The volume of learning material that is available now is kind of mind-blowing. Even for free on YouTube, there's loads of people who share their knowledge, which is fantastic. And that wasn't really present when I started out. And I really struggled to find anything online. You'd have to get the Gnome on DVDs, and you'd have to kind of watch them. But there wasn't the nearly the volume. So a lot of it was kind of like studying from books, practice, looking at the Gnome stuff, and trying to study the media that you were into, film, video games, studying real life. And obviously that's still present in a lot of people's work. But in terms of the level of quality, you have a much higher bar now, I believe, for various different aspects. I think part of it is exposure. Like, people who want to go into games are exposed to such a high level and such a high bar. It's driven that skill level up. And again, like I said, the sharing of knowledge, I think, is key. I think there's been almost like an exponential rise in volume and quality over the past like 10, 15 years.
And what would you say are the pros and cons to that? Because there's got to be like a flip side to everything, kind of thing, right?
The pros and cons. I mean, so pro is that it's going to hopefully drive everyone to improve. There's obviously the influx of talent to the industry, so it gets more competitive, and because of that, it's kind of you're competing against many more people who are very talented. So how do you get selected as either a candidate or as a freelance artist? And I think of late we've seen even very, very talented people driven out of work for one reason or another. And that's not necessarily because of the volume of people in the industry. That could be kind of financial issues that are driven by other things, but it's definitely become very, very competitive. Maybe it's always been a competitive industry, but I think that the sheer numbers have made it more difficult. Plus, you're dealing with a lot of remote work now. So you're not just dealing with competition locally or within the country or within your continent. You're dealing with, competition internationally. I think that became even more acceptable, like by studios when we had COVID, and it kind of opened up the doors for freelancers and more international contracts. Whereas prior to that, like it was really frowned upon. If you had a studio job, you couldn't work from home. Well, it was rare because the art directors wanted to be able to come to your desk and talk to you for obvious reasons. I think that's very valuable.
Yeah.
But with COVID, everyone's hand was forced, and the studios probably thought, well, we can hire anyone from anywhere without having to worry about immigration. There might be some stuff we have to deal with the lawyers, as in how we can get contracts approved and silly things like how do we pay them. But they ironed that stuff out clearly, and it's definitely opened up the world for many people. But again, the counter side is that there's even more competition, and there's talent everywhere. There's talent all over the world, which is it's great that we can kind of tap into that. And, but yeah, it's an interesting landscape. It's funny. I'm not sure where I would sit if I hadn't had the experience that I've had. Where I'd sit now, if I was starting out afresh, be extremely intimidated. As a student, looking at the kind of level you have to attain to get jobs in the industry, it's a tough time.
And like, with that said, have you experienced anything like this in your career? Like this kind of like, I guess you could say you call it a shift or just a little, like you made, I think the retraction is a perfect way to explain it, which is a natural reaction when something expands. Have you experienced anything on this scale yourself personally?
As in?
Like in the industry, like is this the first time you've seen this type of change? Because it has always evolved. As you mentioned before, like with techniques and tools.
Sure.
But have you seen it where like work has been, I guess, abundant, so to speak, versus when it's a bit more, I guess, like restricted right now?
Yeah, I mean, so most of my work, most of my career was spent in the studio.
Yeah.
So about 12 years in studios. And while that was happening, I'd get some freelance offers on as well. So there was always some work coming in. I had my kind of like day-to-day job. And there were redundancies. There were almost yearly redundancies, but not to the scale that we've seen over the past 18 months or so. So that is definitely part of the industry. Often there's a massive amount of hiring as a project's ramping up. And then when it's finished, they let go of people. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of how the industry sustains. There was a massive amount of growth. I mean, it's been growing and growing and growing over however many decades. And it's still growing. It's just slowed somewhat. During COVID, this is when I started my business at the end of 2017. Kind of started off relatively slowly. And then 2018, 2019, COVID, 2020, 21, 22, work kind of really boomed. I think that's part of the reason for that was because remote work opened the doors to freelancers and people who weren't necessarily able to get to a studio. So work exploded, and I was like turning away work monthly, if not weekly, which is a great problem to have. And then we'd made the decision to move back to the UK at the kind of first quarter of 2022. So I started to ramp things down with my business in order to sort out international move, like close the business, sell our house, and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to give myself a little bit of time. But while that was going on, I was noticing a slowdown with the amount of work requests. And they were still coming in, but it definitely started to peter off. And then we moved in the October, and this was, so let me step back. In around, I think that April 2022 was early Mid-Journey, right? As some of the early releases started to come to the forefront, and it became a little more apparent in the concept art community that this is a tool that was on the cusp of kind of turning a corner, and people were kind of curious about it. I got a subscription to Mid-Journey to check it out. Yeah. And I was kind of astounded at like what it could produce without knowing a lot about it. Kind of put that to one side. And then around October, I think was the release of like Mid-Journey 4, and it ironed out a bunch of problems. And at that point, I noticed like a real sharp drop off in requests for work.
Interesting.
And I wasn't sure if that was a coincidence, or if it was kind of like a direct correlation. But I've spoken to dozens of artists, dozens of friends who are in the industry who've really struggled getting work, or have noticed a very similar kind of drop off since around that time. I'm not saying it's purely AI, because globally there's issues financially. There's even the fundamental cost of energy going through the roof, which affects everything, right? That's going to affect everything, from the cost of food to, running a studio, right? So there's been this expansion through COVID, and then this contraction financially, and then there's the advent of AI. And I think throughout 2023, it was one of the quietest years I've had in a while. We were still working, but there were 3 months or 4 months where we had very little coming in. And luckily enough, it was during the summer, so I got to spend the summer with my daughter, which was awesome. So I kind of tried to treat it as a silver lining. I wasn't really touting for work. I wasn't out there like actively looking. I was like, see what happens. I'll panic a little later. But there was definitely a drop off, and everyone I spoke to, like experienced guys who'd been in the industry for the same length of time as me, very talented individuals, like, where's the work? Like, what's going on? And it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what it was. I think it's kind of like a culmination, like almost a perfect storm of things that have happened. That have definitely impacted us, specifically concept art at this point. I don't think it's really impacted other disciplines within games as much yet. Obviously there were layoffs, massive amounts of layoffs that affected other disciplines, but in terms of the AI aspect, I think concept art, pre-visualization was impacted heavily. Like, we do a lot of pitch work, helping either studios in film or game help develop pitches. And I think as a shortcut and a money saver for pitches, AI artwork would be used. And I'm sure many, many people have seen that. They'll see a pitch deck and it's filled with AI artwork. It's no longer necessarily found imagery or imagery that they've contracted artists to do. It's AI stuff, which is like almost zero costs to the person putting the pitch together. But it's meant that someone's lost out on work, right? And there's also the fact that the end product suffers as well. You get this kind of generic amalgamation of ideas that it's got AI look, all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting time. So I've definitely seen an impact on the industry from speaking to a number of people as well. So personally and kind of anecdotally, I'm not sure how you've. I've not spoken to you about this personally, but I mean, I imagine you might have seen a similar kind of thing or heard similar stories.
I take a weird comfort in the fact that it's almost mirrors the same thing that's happened to myself. It's like how you just said it. It could have been the same. Like I could have said the same thing. So it's definitely, I guess, not a local issue to a specific person, but yeah, almost the same. Like I think the way you described it as well, like with the drop off in just requests and either like discussions or whatever, wherever form it takes place, that was noticeable. We just mentioned offline, like our kids are of similar age, so it was also that kind of similar thing for me. It's like, okay, cool, let's use this to advantage kind of thing. Still keeping an eye on it, but yeah, it's the same thing. It was definitely a drop off.
And although it's kind of like a sad thing for everyone to be experiencing, knowing that other people are going through it, I think is really important. Like every artist I spoke to was like, oh, thank God it's not just me, right? Because it's not like I'm not doing something. Yeah. It's a kind of global issue for our community, and but because you don't have exact optics on what it is, you're just making your best guess.
Yes,
I mean, what I'm saying could be complete garbage, but it seems to line up, right? And it is like nothing's ever black and white. It's like there's a number of things that culminate to create a situation. But yeah, it's been a strange time for our industry. At the same time, more people are getting into it. The level of talent rises. People are undercutting each other, right? So it's a funny old time. And then there's the whole debate of using AI and having clients come at you and with AI stuff. I mean, I've had a couple of clients say, look, we've got this concept. Can you build it? And I'm like, that's not a concept. That's something that's just been kicked out of the machine. Yes. It needs a lot of work. Not much of that, but I've seen that. And I've heard other people experience very similar stories or mirror those kind of experiences. So it's there. Yeah. And I don't think it's about to go away. It's just how it's used and how we deal with it. And also for sorry, go on.
No, please go ahead.
And for how studios and art directors choose to implement that stuff, right?
Yeah. Just like regarding, I guess, the current funk, if you want to call it that way. When I was wrapping up uni, which was like 2008 to 10, whatever. Anything that far back is very blurry, but that was that last economic crisis. And I remember like graduating then and then being told, yeah, this is going to be tough. Expect nothing. And it was almost what happened. Yeah. And navigating that. And then in between that time and now, I remember being in a non-art career, getting made redundant and knowing what that experience feels like and when everything kind of like collapses, and it's almost a similar kind of thing. Yeah. But obviously when you've been in similar situations, you kind of know what to expect without being able to predict the future. Yeah. But what's your general, like, I guess, take on things? Like, do you have a strategy in mind? Are you hopeful? Which you kind of hinted earlier as well, like you are hopeful. But yeah, like, how do you think this will kind of play out, or what do you anticipate? I guess with the little that we know, based on what's to come.
I don't think it's going to eradicate our jobs. There's a number of different things that could happen, but I don't think it's going to make us all redundant. I do think it will potentially limit the amount of roles needed. But with that said, it also makes opportunities for smaller studios and indie developers a lot more viable. So if you've got like a one-man or two-man team, leveraging some of those tools would make sense. So you might get a lot, smaller seedlings popping up, new studios that arise from the redundancies. So there's been a decline. There was a massive increase in work. There's been a decline. Loads of people got made redundant, and you can only hope from that pool of talent, more opportunities will arise. As people start to form groups and start studios.
Mhm.
Funding is obviously necessary. So the kind of global money issue right now, there's obviously a recession. It's harder to get funding, but that will even out. Like, I think we've had a massive ripple, and things will kind of even out. There's also the kind of the legal and ethical issues surrounding the use of AI, and I think I'm not on the crest of the wave, like looking at what's happening immediately, but I know there are developments surrounding that. So there needs to be legislation in place to protect people. I think it's hard for governments to keep up to speed with the same progress in the tech world. They can't match it. So they're always kind of one step behind, but there needs to be stuff in place to protect people beyond our industry. I think the impact of AI for humanity as a whole, right? Because we need vocation, we need a drive, and if you kind of follow where the use of AI could go, some people might think it's like a utopia, but it won't be. It'll be. There's a lot of people who lack meaning in their life, or they have to find some other kind of meaning. And it's in no one's interest to have a population that is sat on their ass doing not that much, or depressed, or whatever, right? So, I think we're still gonna have issues with it. There will be a certain amount of job loss, at least for now. But I think things will even out. And then I think it's going to be how the tools are developed, because it's not about to disappear. And at the end of the day, we're in an industry that is looking to make money for its shareholders and to keep itself afloat. It's not a charity. They're going to want to leverage whatever technology they can to be competitive. So it will be adopted with a lot of studios. I'm sure it's already being adopted in many studios already. I don't have visibility into what's happening into all the studios, but I'm sure it's being used in one form or another. So it's kind of like figuring out how that is being used ethically, legally, and then how artists implement that stuff, how art directors implement that stuff. I've kind of left the AI stuff to one side and I played with Midjourney. I'm kind of aware of what it can do to a degree, and I've kind of parked it to one side. I've not really had any requests of like, you must use AI in this project yet. But I've got a strong feeling that's kind of around the corner. It might be like, we want you to do some quick exploration with AI. I can imagine that stuff coming in. And it would be akin to reference gathering, or you do it in parallel to. I've got mixed feelings on it, especially being more aware of how the data was obtained. I think that's pretty shady. Going from essentially like a research project to a business. So these guys have got some questions, and they need to have some good answers for.
What was it like when you played with it? Like, similar to myself, exactly the same as yourself. I was thinking about it now. Like, I haven't touched it. I think 2022 when it dropped, right? Like, I think I discovered it like, I think May or early summer, and I think by August I had my fun, so to speak. Kind of realized, where this is actually from. Very naive myself, like, okay, this is a cool tool. Rapid image generation. Look what I can do with this, with my awesome skills. And then realizing, being naive, thinking that, this is clearly with permission of everybody else. Someone's getting paid. Like, for example, on Instagram, you can put any music you want on your post. That artist is getting paid in some way, shape, or another, or the studio at least. I thought it'd be the same. Clearly, I was very naive, very wrong. But I haven't touched it since and not needed to. Although very aware of how much people are still using it and heavily using it. But what was your take on it when you first saw it?
Just in awe. One was the speed, how easy it is to produce, decent quality imagery. That's obviously subjective of what you think is decent quality. But like, for instance, my mentality was, this could be something that I could paint over, or there could be elements from this that I could, use in collage, being completely ignorant about how the data set was kind of sourced. So I played about with it, I think, for probably about the same amount of length as you, stopped my subscription, and then I think I paid again a little later, like when I got back to the UK, and there was Midjourney 4. I was like, now it can do hands, and it's not completely mangled. Again, played with it for a bit, and then I've not touched it for a long time. But really, very hard for an individual to compete with the breadth and the speed, the cost of a tool like that. And I'm not saying it solves design problems, because it definitely doesn't. I think that's really where it falls down. And with originality, it really falls down. A lot of stuff is just like, I've seen a million of these now, right?
Yeah.
And you can spot AI imagery, right? Every now and then I'll see like an Instagram page where it's almost like mock candid photography, and it's some interesting ideas, and I think, that's quite interesting, right? And you've offered something that's a little different, but in terms of the how it's being implemented in like concept art, I mean, you kind of spot that stuff a mile off, and it doesn't really offer anything. I think the reason that I would approach an artist to hire them is because I'm interested in their view, their filter for them, right? What their voice. And I think with AI, you don't get that, right? You get this weird mishmash amalgamation. There's potentially ways where you can get like kind of more unique visions from the tool. But a lot of the time it's like, I've seen this looks like something that I've seen before. But yeah, it's still early days, right? So I'm talking about this based on what I've seen currently, but things are progressing at a phenomenal rate, as we've seen. Even from 2021 to 22, like the jump in Midjourney and AI image generating tools in general has just been phenomenal. And then you're seeing like text to video, text to 3D, or image to 3D, and where that kind of trajectory goes, like it's going to impact everyone in the industry in one form or another. ChatGPT with code. So odd time, really odd time. I definitely had an existential crisis, like one being wowed by the tool and then going, God, like, is this the end? Like, is this it? It's weird. It's really strange.
Yeah. Everyone I've spoken to kind of had that thing. It was like, I guess like the Oppenheimer film. Oh, look what I did. Oh shit, look what I just did.
Yeah.
Oh, look what just happened, and look what it can do.
Yeah.
But I guess it's one of those things. Like it's so weird. It's so like almost fictional, like how it's just kind of dropped on our heads. But then when you kind of really look into it, it's not really like how much we've just been giving our data away freely without even knowing it. And then it's like, are we surprised that they've just taken up all of this stuff and just almost like throwing our waste back at us and saying, pay us for it? And a lot of people are happily doing it as well. And it's almost the jokes you could say on us as a population, just for like lapping all this stuff up. But yeah, the topic can go in so many different avenues, like philosophical, like just economical and creative as well. And it looks like it is going to affect every single thing. And when I look back, like other things that I've seen in my life so far, the last time I saw something like this where it really changed how people did things was, you could say, social media. And obviously before that, you could say the internet. And even if you apply the same kind of like logic of how we've gotten used to social media or almost realized how much it's affected us and how long it's been here, and we still have no grasp on it. I have no way to really like control it. And now AI is going to do the same thing, and we have no idea either. Who knows where it's going to end up?
I've made the same analogy. Like we're hardly able to use social media as it is.
Yeah.
And we're kind of seeing the repercussions, especially on like younger generations who that's all they've known, right?
Yeah.
And we're of a generation where, you know, we lived before the internet, right?
Yeah.
We lived before smartphones.
Yes.
And we got the kind of foundational part of our life in that period. So I consider myself really lucky to have experienced that, and was innocent to all this kind of stuff, essentially. And we lived through its development. And this, we're kind of at the very tip of the iceberg. It just so happens that it's kind of like affected our industry really early on, which is bizarre. I would have never have thought in a million years that when AI comes, it's going to affect concept art right away. Like, what? Kidding me? Can't you handle like the really boring, laborious, like monkey
more important
work? All more important stuff, right? You know, there's definitely applications that can help humanity, so helping to solve medical issues. You know, again, I don't want to show my ignorance, but like there's definitely better applications. But when you think about it logically, like where they got the information from, it was low hanging fruit. So, what can we get for free?
Yeah,
well, we
exactly.
can get all the text on the internet, and we can get all the imagery on the internet and all the video, right?
Yeah.
Let's leverage that, and then and like you said, regurgitate it back to them and make them pay for it. So yeah,
it's and I think it's almost like this is more like the test tube side of things. Like this is what it's capable of, and you mentioned earlier about investors and stuff. Like obviously the ones that are pumping billions and billions and God knows how much into this, everyone kind of feels that they need to have, every major company seems like they need to have some kind of AI arm in their business, at least all the epic ones. So if they're going to invest money into it, whether it's a failed project or not, they're still going to be experimenting and all that kind of stuff. And I do feel like it's going to be more like, what's it called when you like stick a dynamite and the wire? Like we're kind of at the tip of the wire, and then every kind of industry or other people that think it's not going to affect us, it's going to reach you. Totally. And it's going to be like how it is. And I think, like say, take social media and the internet. If you look at it with distance, I think it's kind of like 50-50. Like as much bad has come out of it, there's clearly some positives that's come out of it. Change people's lives. I mean, we would not be having this conversation today if it wasn't for those kind of advancements. And I assume with any technological advancement that we adopt either by force or intentionally as humanity, like it's going to have the same kind of like balance. Like there's going to be a lot of trash, a lot of nonsense, a lot of horrible stuff that happens. And also some profound things that we think, remember that time when we never had this kind of stuff, how difficult it was? Yeah. And, you know, like, when you face this kind of stuff, like, do you, obviously, we're all going to have these moments. I'm sure a lot of people are listening had that same thing too, where you're thinking, oh shit, everything's over. And you think, oh, no, it's going to be fine. Where do you sit now with that? Like, do you feel like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like, there's nothing I can do. Let's just focus on what I can do. Or do you have a different opinion?
No, I definitely feel like I'm going to have to adjust regardless. The only thing that's constant is change, right? Yeah. And the world has changed so much. I mean, like I said, I started out as a 2D artist, and now I do a hell of a lot of 3D. I'm actually doing 2D currently. So I still keep that skill set somewhat alive. But I've had to change to make myself a viable candidate in the industry and to offer something that was different at the time. And, you know, you can see it being adopted. And I think that there's going to become a point where, you know, these do become integral to our work in one form or another. If it's time saving with texturing or whatever, however it manifests, it will become part of our work. And it's something I am keeping an eye on. But it hasn't changed yet to the point where it's like, oh, I have to implement this into my work, otherwise I'm not going to get anything.
Yeah.
The other side of it is like coming at it from a student or a newbie's perspective, and studying art. Is it gonna eliminate that kind of drive? Knowing that those tools are available, these apps are available, you can download it on your phone or whatever, and you can instantly make imagery, like good looking stuff that you aspire to be able to create. Is it going to take away the drive to learn how to draw, learn the fundamentals of design? And then we'll see a drop in those skills and a loss of those skills because people don't need to do it anymore. Like I'm seeing a lot of 3D guys, they can't draw. Right? And that's if you're a great 3D designer, fine. But I can also see a lot of 3D artists who can build a scene and render it and all that. Like their design work's just not there. And that's because they haven't spent that time working on those fundamentals. Now, is that going to be the same with people who adopt AI, especially for this younger generation who don't know different, right? They might never have picked up a pencil to draw, a spaceship or a character or study anatomy, right? Again, I'm not privy to what's happening in the university courses, but I can almost guarantee the use of AI will be part of these kind of game art courses in some form or another. Again, I'm speculating, but with the way things are going, with the way the industry is going, and the adoption of it, I can only see that being part of the education. So yeah, it's interesting, and like you said, with the advent of social media, there's benefits and drawbacks. We're only kind of just recognizing some of the drawbacks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some of them are very visible, but we're seeing big impact socially on kids, especially. So how is that going to affect the younger generations, right? So yeah, it's, speaking specifically for our industry, I'm curious to see how that's going to affect the skill sets of up and coming artists.
Speaking to some that I've not spoken to many, but a few, it's been interesting, and some of them that I've spoken to seem very almost they're doubling down on like wanting to be an artist, which is interesting, but equally like seeing AI is like, it's just there. Let's just give it a play. Okay, whatever. But I want to conquer this skill. I want to master this thing. And I'm hopeful. And I think what I would like to see, and I think I'm seeing it in some, is like what you mentioned a moment ago, where it was, yes, definitely like just a general thing. And I have so many people that I know, so many people that I love, just love a shortcut. And they just want to go anything the shortest possible way. Preferably they'll have to move an inch and they'll get to that. And I'm sure a lot of people will do that as well.
Human nature. It's human nature.
But when you really want to like push for something, or you have a passion for something and you really want to understand it, you have to dive deep. And I can see a lot of people almost realizing that, like you kind of see with automation, like I don't know about yourself, but me personally, the more I've always been wary of automation because I always find it limiting. And then when I see people rely on it heavily, I'm thinking, why are we stuck on this automated path when there's so much more possibilities or whatever? But, some systems run on that. Nevertheless, when it's about exploration or, like you mentioned, design, like you can't just plug it in. Like you have to nurture, you have to develop it, you have to grow it. And then the art of growing something is another art form in itself. And that's where we get some of the best stuff, is the people that really, really go into that. So I think like with us, like I remember growing up thinking I think I watched one interview where I forgot who it was, but they said that they never had a TV. And to me, that was like a biggest shock ever. Like, how could you live without a TV? Like the TV is everything. Yeah. Looking at now, thinking, there was a point in time when people existed perfectly well without a TV. And when you look at it, I guess at my age, I'm fast approaching 40. I'm thinking sometimes less noise is way, way better. So I kind of wish that, maybe if I can just shut everything off, it's great as well. So I think every generation will definitely like just use what they have. And I think sometimes it goes full circle. Like if you have all the automated stuff, you might want to do things manually and then find equilibrium in the middle versus if you traditionally find, oh, this is a great tool and whatnot. But I think it all kind of, at least in my utopian vision, the pursuit of the craft and wanting to make something that's really original, you have to kind of find that equilibrium in the middle.
Totally. And kind of going back to, reaching out to artists because of their voice and their vision.
Yeah.
Something unique, something new. Providing people don't stop making artwork, we're always going to have that.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be new individuals with their own experiences, their own perspective, their own lens on life and reality and design, their own tastes, and they're going to bring that to the table. Right. Since I've been running my business, I contract people and hire them for projects, and I hire them for their vision, right? And for what they can bring, but often something that I can't bring, right? Because it's not me. So yeah, I don't think that's not about to disappear. And that really sets us apart from AI. It's rare. Like I said earlier, there's the occasion you'll see something a little bit different from an AI image. But there's so much garbage and there's so much noise, it kind of devalues it all.
Yes.
Right? There's just an absolute abundance of it. And I think people will get bored of that, and they want that kind of, even if it's flawed, that human touch.
Yes.
With perfections, imperfections, all that stuff. It has like a soul to it, and I don't want to sound corny, but it does. And it's the same reason, you love your friends and family for all their flaws, right? It adds to that personality, and some of that I'm not really seeing with AI, and I think people will soon be fed up of that. Maybe less so kind of Joe blogs. I'm hoping it'll affect the kind of end consumer, but definitely people within the studios.
Yes.
I've not really run into many art directors who are like, you have to use this, or I prefer this AI to a human's touch. There's been the odd occasion where it's like, here's some AI reference, we're thinking this kind of thing, but don't use it as gospel, right? So
yeah.
And I'm hoping that's kind of how it stays. And that work keeps them coming in.
Let's hope so too. Yeah. I mean, I guess like IPs are not stopping, things are not stop being made, and there's got to be somebody who has to make that stuff. And I'm sure AI can be trained to remake classics, things that are considered classics. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a coder, but I don't think it can make, like, where you've got on your shelf, I can see you got Akira in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Can it make something that's as revered as that without the human input or minimal human input? Maybe other AIs will appreciate it, but I don't know. I don't think I will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's not possible.
Yeah, you can't
because
nowadays.
I couldn't say that. But I mean, again, that's from someone's vision, right? And it's a unique vision, a unique taste, and kind of like a culmination of ideas that are very focused. And I think that's what you're not really getting with AI. So I'll be amazed when there's a classic that comes from AI. Really, that's when you'll be like, okay, this is a real turning point. But yeah, I don't think we're about to make ourselves fully redundant yet.
And has, like, I guess, well, the theme of the last few years has been AI, or the shadow that's looming over the industry. And sometimes shadows are just shadows in the past. Sometimes they're just looming threats, and Sauron comes out of nowhere. But like, how has it impacted, and has it even impacted how you view creativity and your own craft?
It's like I said, I kind of had like an existential crisis over it, right? especially early on when I was playing with it, I was just kind of like in awe of what it could do and the speed at which it could do it. I think I've kind of just had to focus more about what it is in my voice and what I bring to the table. And why companies would hire me to do my thing. And you more than just artwork, we are people as well, and we work in teams, we work with others. That's a key part to what we do, right? We're helping solve problems, and who we are as people beyond just the artwork is key to that. So for instance, like when I'm working with artists, how they are, how they interact, what they offer, in terms of reliability, ideas, that is key even beyond their final deliverables, right? That's a key part onto why I would want to work with them and continue working with them. I've worked with some amazing artists who just don't have communication skills, for instance, and that is very difficult. So I think because you're not getting any of that with the AI imagery and the AI tools, it's kind of reassuring that we're not about to kind of be wiped off the map. And like you said, some people are kind of doubling down on their own creative endeavors because of this. It's made me see that value, right? And kind of be a little more reflective. And I think the real important thing is kind of being an individual, right? And developing your own voice. I know a lot of artists imitate, and that's a natural part of your kind of journey. But I think it's really important to differentiate yourself from others, not forcefully, but being aware of, reflecting on your own experiences, and what it is that you can bring to the table. That's, one, true to yourself, but also will separate you from others. I know there's some irony there because I put out a course, and I saw a lot of work that was, very similar to my own from the course, but that was a stepping stone for those artists, right? And a lot of those people I've seen like absolutely flourish. I'm lucky enough that I've hired a few of them. I've seen their work kind of go through the roof. Like, wow, like they've really taken off. And I've never had that feeling where I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to use an AI tool instead of hiring an artist. Like that's never occurred to me. So but at the same time, it's been a weird time, right? Like just the advent of it and how quickly it's happened is kind of a shock. I think a lot of people are feeling that. But yeah, it's I think it's definitely forced me to reflect on art, myself, on humanity, like where things are going, and potential dystopian outcomes, which I'd like to avoid. I'm sure we'd all like to avoid.
I know people tend to like do things with a utopian vision, but it normally ends with a dis in front of it, and that's what we end up with. But speaking about your course, one thing, I joined Learn Squared back in, obviously I was a student like since 2016. I joined them in a work capacity, I think 2018. I remember your course when it dropped, and just seeing the homework gallery for that particular course itself just speaks volumes for itself. I've spoken to many people who have like you just said, took the course, it unlocked so many doors for them, and they've flourished and just found their own voice as well. How has that been as an educator, someone who's not like given them almost a button to say, press this and you're going to get imagery, but almost taught them like the secrets, so to speak, of like how to really get your creative voice out there? How has that impacted?
I always find it absolutely amazing. One, looking at the students' work. Two, that they followed it and enjoyed it. as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the guys at Learn Squared, they really helped me with the development of the course.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never really taught before, other than imparting advice or skills with colleagues at work.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never really taught like that. So they kind of held my hand through it and really helped. But it was amazing. And I found people who'd like followed the course to a T. I think one artist sent me renders of his character, and it was a 1-to-1 of mine. And I was like,
right.
have you just taken the model and like re-rendered it? And he's like, no, I like followed it. I was freeze framing. And, you know, admittedly, I gave, you know, a very finite set of tools and techniques as a foundation to build off. And I've seen people absolutely run with it, and they might use that as a foundation, but they find better techniques or a workflow that works better for them. And obviously technology changes and things progress. But it was amazing to see the volume and quality of work that came out. And also to see, you know, artists who were predominantly either 3D tackling 2D stuff and looking at kind of more of the design side, or artists who were solely 2D who wanted to make that jump to 3D, pick up quite an intimidating tool, ZBrush, and, you know, really enjoy it. And it's great because when I first played with it, ZBrush, and kind of got into once I got over the UI and stuff, it was like play. And I had a real kind of childlike enjoyment out of it. It was pure play. And, you know, when I get into the zone, when I'm in ZBrush or any kind of design really, and you can kind of get that feeling, it's not work, regardless of what you're doing, and it's a satisfaction that you can't really explain unless you've done that yourself. And to know that other people are doing that and they're getting there, and I really enjoyed the process and what I've got from it. And here, look, check out this portfolio that I've got now. It's mind blowing. And I know, like I said, it's helped people get jobs, it's helped people build portfolio. I've hired some of these guys, and I admire a lot of those artists as well. Like, they've gone way beyond any of my expectations. Not saying that it was all from my course. Obviously, it was a lot of their hard work, but even to be a stepping stone and helping, that is fantastic. It's an amazing.
Do you want to drop some names?
I don't want to call anyone out specifically.
Okay. Fair enough.
But I mean, there's so many.
Sure.
And I mean, that course I was developing from about halfway through 2016, and I think it released at the start of 2017 or thereabouts. And people still mention it. It's like, 7 years old now?
Yes.
Which is kind of crazy. So yeah, it's super cool, man. I'm very privileged, one, to have had that experience, but two, what it's given me. And I think also it helped me get my name out there, like people in studios saying, oh, you know, it's this guy who concepts in ZBrush. Like, we could do some 3D concept art. Let's reach out to him. So it was definitely a great stepping stone for me as well. So very much appreciative of that, even to this day. Yeah.
You mentioned there, and that's music to my ears, when you mentioned the aspect of like treating almost creativity like play, like getting into that zone where it's like, we always talk about like the flow state, but there's also that play state as well, where you just think like it's pure exploration, like Lego, but every Lego piece you touch is exactly what you need, and you can kind of do what you want with it. Is that the core of your creative philosophy? Do you even do that on gigs when possible? Is that like something that you always like, whatever the task is, you want to get yourself to that place?
If I can, yes. Often my day can be quite stilted, so or interrupted with various things, either meetings or giving feedback. So when I do get that opportunity, I love getting into that place, and I will try and maintain it as long as possible. Now that I'm a bit older, I have to take breaks from the computer, from my eyes, from my neck. I need to get up and walk around. When I was a little younger, especially when I was, around the age I was when I was developing the course, those kind of things weren't an issue. But now I'm 40. I actually have to, I need to get up and walk around.
Yeah.
And I can't do the late nights with the kid. Like I've got a 5-year-old. I can't stay up till 4 a.m. sculpting anymore, right? So things have changed a little, but if I can attain that, usually I get my best results from being in that state, and things just click. It's almost like a puzzle that starts coming together, and you're like, this makes sense. This makes, and it's fantastic. It's like a high, like being there. But it's not always achievable for one reason or another. But yeah, it's obviously that's where you want to be, right? Because you're not necessarily always thinking, you're kind of doing. And it's sometimes when you're there and you have that vision and things are just slotting together, why isn't it this easy all the time?
Yeah,
because it's not always that easy.
Yeah,
but it's definitely I seek that.
Do you find that translates through to clients or their work as well when they see you've done that piece where you think, okay, I was in the zone at this point. Do you see that radiation almost affect clients also, or is it only contained within yourself and how you see it?
I think
that's quite an abstract question.
It's an abstract question. I think it's definitely contextual. It depends on what the client's looking for, but if you're managing to hit those notes, then that should come through, right? And I think that definitely is reflected in your work, and you can see when something is forced and stuff doesn't quite sit well for whatever reason, or there's something missing. Or, it's just, it doesn't have a certain flow through it. There's a lack of energy, a lack of life, right? And often I think a lot of people I can test this myself, but when you have a sketch that you're trying to refine and you end up kind of making it feel stagnated and a bit bland, there's an energy that's been lost from that because you're trying to reinterpret something. That's a skill in itself, right? It's taking the sketch, taking the energy of that to the final polished thing. But yes, I think it's definitely visible for the client, whether they're aware of that or not. Yeah. Obviously, you're aware of the process. They're not necessarily aware of the process, what it took to get to that stage. But yeah, I think that's something that most artists can mirror in their own experiences, and it just feels great to be there, right? Like when you can actually get there. But yeah, I think part of that is overcoming technical stuff. So when you're past that and you're not thinking as much about, I need to press this, or I need to do this process, and it's more intuitive, that's when you can get to that stage. But yeah.
And on the flip side, giving away some, I guess, insider secrets, what if in that situation where you're not able to get to that state, but you have a brief to deliver upon, what kind of, I guess, tools or techniques do you tap into that can help you to at least still deliver?
If I'm like struggling with something, often I'll like have to take a step back and like reflect on it. So if I'll force my way through the day, see where I get to, take a step back, mentally digest it, and try and problem solve. Like, what are other options that I could explore? Like, try and follow the logic. Like, what am I missing here? And often you could like be in the shower. It's a great place to problem solve, or lying in bed at night.
Yeah.
And you're processing things, and then you go, oh, why have I not thought of that? That totally makes sense. Like, that's definitely an avenue I can go down. And you can find different things to explore. And I often find that's like probably the best way to overcome some of those problems. And then any artist will be able to say, they can reflect back on their work and see things to improve on. And you can do that throughout. I mean, we have a kind of internal dialogue, right, when we're designing, when we're creating artwork. Sometimes you just need a bit of space and a little bit of time. And also having opportunity to like clear your, seeing the phrase, you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
It's just having a little bit of perspective and maybe opening up your eyes to other possibilities or other sources of inspiration. So yeah, I tend to look at reference material as well. If I'm really stuck, like where could this go? Or like what's the best way I can produce this design? What different kind of aspects could I bring to this that would make sense for the client and for the design as a whole? And kind of like pulling things in, like what works here? Is it the color palette? Is it the junction between certain materials? Like trying to draw stuff in and try and fill my mental library. You know what I mean? And then digest that and bring it back. Yeah.
Final question, and I have to wrap up soon.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of us right now are working on their portfolios because got no time to do anything else. You mentioned there before, obviously, like you hire people, so you definitely have like specific ingredients you like to see from artists and in portfolios as well. Anything that you would say is absolutely key that people should focus on whilst they're working on their portfolios?
Design skills. Number one, I'll hire a 2D artist who works essentially like in pencil or just in Photoshop with good design skills over a 3D artist who can render beautifully but lacks that design skill, right? I think that's key, really, as a concept artist. I know there's an ongoing conversation currently in regards to like keyframe artists and gaps in their portfolio and why they're not getting jobs. I think again, I can kind of mirror that. Like, it's great if you can put a scene together, but what makes it your voice, right? What do you bring to the table? I think design work, be it hard surface, landscape, character, whatever aspect of design it is bringing that originality, bringing that voice, that perspective that is different. So I think it's key for people to kind of really concentrate on that and not just emulate other people. And this doesn't happen overnight, so I don't expect people to go, oh yeah, I'll just be myself, right? But I mean, it's like developing that taste and looking not just at other people and other artists of who you admire, but things that you enjoy in the real world, things that you enjoy in design, be it architecture, vehicle design, graphic design, nature, what is it that you find interesting? And I think having a kind of wider view, a wider gamut of stuff to pull from will add. And obviously it goes through your filter, right? It goes through your filter. Like, what do I want to take from that? And I think that's what makes it interesting. So I think people need to kind of go beyond ArtStation and what is trending and what is cool and what is the current thing, and produce something different, right? There's so many like hard surface artists that produce similar kind of stuff. And then you get someone who's got like a really unique voice, and like, I can tell that's their work, right? Because they have their own vision, their own voice, what they bring that no one else brings, right? I think that's a really beautiful thing for an artist to have, is to be able to get that. I think it's something that everyone should strive for. So, I've seen that. I know who that artist is, right? Yes. So I think that's key. I'll try and reinforce that to anyone who I think, friend, colleague. I'll push that if I feel like that's lacking. Like I know a lot of 3D guys who want to get into concept, but they might lack those skills. So that's something like, just draw as much as you can. And if you've got a pen and paper, there's no excuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my main thing. I might be biased because I had that foundation and I see a lot of value in that. And I know not everyone has that process, and I don't want to be prescriptive, but I do see from my own personal experience that having a lot of value. So yeah, that would be my one tidbit of advice. There's draw more, design. Yeah.
Incredible. Alex, you're always full of wisdom. We know we've tried to do this for many, many years. We're glad we got it done. No, but even with the course, like I always revisit your course, especially the first chapter with the ideation and sketching. To me, that's always gold. And no matter when you recorded it, either back then or now, it still holds. So
I don't know about that, man, but I appreciate it.
Oh, that's my opinion. That's my opinion.
I appreciate that.
I always take value from it. But Alex, thanks so much for jumping on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thanks to Alex for jumping on and sharing his wisdom and experiences. You can learn more from him today by hitting the links attached to this episode and taking his course Concepting in ZBrush. And remember, the first lesson is free, as well as to see what he's up to by tapping on his social links. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.